Can y'all hear me in the back? I hope I have everybody's attention. I know it's so hard to sit through presentations all day, but we're just getting started. So hopefully this will actually energize you for the balance of the day. Everybody, please just shut your laptops, put your phones down, because what we're about to speak about is so important. And in fact, as I look into the next 20 years of where the world of technology, where security, where critical infrastructure risk exists, and what's about to take place, everybody in this room is so critical to the success and well-being of the whole planet, of humanity. Keeping everything secure, running properly, it's just so important. I have had such an interesting career going back to the mid-'80s when I had an internship actually with IBM. And the PC was just coming in to existence. Smart typewriters back then were a big piece of innovation actually. The ability to see 100 characters and then hit print instead of having to go use whiteout every time you make a mistake to see it, edit it, hit print. That was such an amazing time, but it was really just the beginning. And so what I'm here to talk about today is the sum of my experiences back to from when the PC came out to looking 20 years into the future, which I've spent the last 5 years doing. It started at Google, actually working with the UK Prime Minister's designee, Sir Mark Walpert was his name, on behalf of California OES, working with him to identify future risks because of some of the work I had actually done with Cal OES. And what's interesting is I look back and I go back to 911 and I think about all the risks, and we all remember when there was just such this huge push to understand physical security and to make sure we were physically secure. And we put concrete barriers everywhere in front of buildings, poles. I mean, it was an interesting time. And we started to look at cyber at that time. It was always important, and we were always concerned about security, how we handled data. And as the years went by, CGIS data, PII, Health and Human Services related data over those years. I worked with so many system integrators to deploy voting systems, transportation systems, Health and Human Service foster care, child welfare systems, deployed them in many states. At Google, I had an opportunity to work with DARPA. Most recently, I had opportunities to work with the Department of Defense on some crazy things that just get the juices flowing when we think about them. But in fact, it's the people in this room. It's your ecosystems and what you do and what you work on. And importantly, the vendors that are out in the lobby right now, I wish they were in here to see this too, because of the challenges on them to get this right as well. When I was at Microsoft, we kind of started to move towards branch computing, branch server computing, Windows and the desktop and the power of the desktop. We started to work more and more on the security of data while we were at Microsoft, locking everything down with an understanding that the world was becoming more and more risky. I went on to work for HP for a while, where the old EDS accounts that HP had acquired through their acquisition, many of them large brands, large companies and governments, turned to us at HP to design mission-critical systems whereby we assured 5 nines stability. And believe me, we signed contracts where we were required to keep those things locked down and safe, and in every way. It's just such an interesting time. But as I go back through these 30 years through the course of the presentation with you, and as I look in this room, I know many of you, in fact, I saw a bunch of names on the list that even when I was in college, they were in college too, and we started working in Sacramento in the IT industry. And they went on to work for Oracle and Microsoft and SAP, and anyway, so many familiar faces. But as we go through this journey, let me see if I got this. Let's think in terms of what we've all seen in the last 30 years and what we will see in the next 30 years, and maybe 20, 15, but let's just think of a 30, 40-year window, right? Let's think about what we've seen and what's coming. You may have noticed when you saw the agenda or when I put my first slide up that I included bio in there. This is different than securing from the standpoint of identity and access management, or locking down who gets to see what, when, and where. In the next 15 years, bio is going to be how people connect to the Internet of Things, how people's brains connect. I think, we all thought as we watched Watson compete on Jeopardy and come up and play chess, and as we watched artificial intelligence evolve, et cetera, we watched in awe as these incredibly powerful companies and governments and technology advancements tried to simply match the power of the human brain. Within the next 10, 20 years, there'll be 8 billion brains connected, and I do mean connected. And that just poses such interesting risks and challenges and opportunities for all of society. It starts with unlimited education and hopefully a purpose and a focus on elevating humanity with the power of technology and the things that can take place. But as you in this room know all too well, it's not just about the power of humanity, it's how it's used and what's going to happen to us as this unfolds. So this trajectory is mind-blowing. Just quickly, this is the most exciting stuff to me as I lay what I'm about to lay out, because it should change your mindset a little bit. It should make you think a little bit differently about what's coming and what's about to happen, and more importantly, why. We all carry a smartphone in this room. I'm sure every one of us has one. It's more powerful than a supercomputer in the 90s. In the 80s, I was working at Deloitte and IBM, and they were designing the child welfare system, case management system, and my team was designing the networks to deploy it across the state, keep it secure. We went out and did the state of Oklahoma, we did the state of Washington. We learned a lot back in those days. We had Banyan, we had Novell, we had to keep everything secure. In fact, we were building network operations centers to run all this stuff. We were partnering with software companies. We were partnering with the system integrators. My team and people I worked with that were way smarter than I were designing these things, and we were implementing them. And we were running them, and we were patching them, and we were caring, and we were feeding. Amazing times, but to know now what we know and to see our smartphone reminds us that as we look at it, it's such a magnificent device. And it really poses so many unique risks and opportunities. In fact, this smartphone that we look at that had all that compute power, really is the digitization of kind of everything we knew up to the point, up to today. Everything's being digitized. In fact, we're being digitized. If you think a driverless car is the digitization of location, destination, in the case of Uber, perhaps payment, identity, mashing these things up, making a transportation system that has digitized the driver. I myself have been digitized in many ways. In fact, when I think back to the desk I sat at most of my early career, everything that sat on that desk has been digitized, and you in this room and many like you are responsible for keeping all that digitized stuff secure, and it's critically important. When it's all secure, when it's all connected, when the Internet of Things and devices and people are connected, we can do so many amazing, powerful things, but it's complex, it's challenging, and it's risky. But that said, as we reflect, as we look back at what we've seen, as we've watched and witnessed and participated in the digitization of so many things, it's easy to look at smart typewriter, PC networks, Knox, the internet, Wi-Fi, man, when Wi-Fi came out, we, in designing and deploying systems, just saw so many amazing advancements. It was just amazing. Of course, the internet, et cetera. Along came big data. I remember sitting on a panel out at the DoD at the Ronald Reagan Library one time, where the CIA, the FBI, all the three-letter agencies, the Army, Navy, everybody was in the room today. The Air Force Academy folks were there. And we said, dust off your books because big data just became real. Your ability to implement and see data, whether it be text data, voice data, image data, to a digitized environment, they're all the same. They're just bits and bytes. It was at this moment, and it wasn't that long ago, it was at this moment where we realized big data is a reality. Dust off all those things that bothered you over the prior years. because all of a sudden they became doable, they became affordable, and relatively risk-free to implement. Columnar databases were coming out. There was just these advancements that took place. All of a sudden, those problems could be resolved. That was amazing. And as I look back and I think about it, when I think about all the challenges over really decades that we couldn't resolve, and all of a sudden an abundance, this term is prevalent in the world today. Peter Diamandis and others, Ray Kurzweil, speak of abundance, and it's an amazing thing. Let me just say for one moment, in the cloud that exists today, whether it's Amazon, IBM, Google, Microsoft, pick these great companies, and there's many more. There's an abundance of compute power, storage, identity. All the elements of technology exist in abundance. 4 people starting a new company can build something that General Motors couldn't build just 15, 20 years ago. That's the amazing, another mind-blowing aspect of, as we look forward now, with an abundance of everything technical, what is the world going to look like? As 8 billion people connect to and have knowledge of and the resources of the largest governments and companies, small teams are going to emerge, and they're going to do new things. And they're going to be good things, and they're going to be bad things. And everybody in this room watches and waits and shares and collaborates and sees. When I was at Microsoft, we brought the state of California and the multi-state, the MSI, the Information Security Advisory group that was assembled of all the states and counties and federal coming together and begin to share with each other. Now it happens it's system generated. These amazing security platforms are sharing, and everybody's keeping each other informed. But as we look forward into 30 years, and I encourage everybody to take a look at a new video game that's coming out called Cyberpunk. It's got Keanu Reeves, and it's just really amazing. But historically, art, imagination, creativity has shown us the future well before I got here. I grew up watching Star Trek, all those little devices, the handheld, the body scanners, everything else, so that's all real now. And so in a video game type scenario like Cyberpunk, and there's others, don't get me wrong, this one's, it's a game my son and I know the next generation is really excited about. But when you look at the world as seen through the eyes of these creators and these artists, you begin to gain a better understanding of what's coming, and it's crazy. And it's real and it's true, and somehow we need to keep it all safe and secure. And we need to keep it all purposed for the right reasons and the right applications, and together and only together can we do this. Okay, it's so hard to understand the next 30 years, so here's a little model, a little exercise that I learned when I was at Google, and I love to share it. If we were to think of Moore's law and the exponential curve, Moore's law would say compute power is going to basically double every 2 years. And in fact, most interestingly enough, not only is that compute power going to double every 2 years, but really it's going to cut in half in price. So now I'm just going to do a little analogy, and this is so important, and I'm going to do this quickly, but really let this sink in, because this is going to tell you what you're up against in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. If I were to walk in a linear fashion and each step was a meter, after one step, I would have walked 1 meter. After 2 steps, I would have walked 2 meters. After 10 steps, I would have walked 10 meters. That's a linear function. Our world technology, the advancement of technology, the speed of technological advancement is not linear at all, it's exponential. And you'll hear so much about this concept of the exponential technology curve, but here it is in a nutshell, and this is reality. This is reality of the last 30 years, and it's going to be reality for the next 30 years. In fact, when you start to merge and mash up various technologies, there's a great chance that it's actually going to move faster than the exponential curve that I'm defining. But let's just stick with this for now. If I wanted to get to the sun and back, if I were stepping in an exponential manner instead of a linear manner, and each step doubled, my first step would be a meter, My next step would be 2 meters. My next step would be 4 meters. My next step would be 8 meters, etc. And the brain puzzle, and to get everybody excited and think about this, my question to all of you is, how many steps would it take you to get to the sun? If each step doubled and your first step was a meter, how many steps would it take you to get to the sun? And by the way, that's 149.6 billion meters. And my question, anybody have a guess? Yeah. So I cheated though, and you're right. I put it up there in good eye. But actually 40 will get you there and back. And really it's like 37 and a half will get you there, and something like 30. But I just say 40 will get you there and back. But the most amazing thing isn't that 40 gets you there and back. The most amazing thing is that the 40th step gets you all the way back. 39 gets you there, 40 gets you back. That's the crazy, crazy effect of an exponential curve. And in every aspect of our experiences with technology, in pretty much every area, but certainly combined and in compute power, this is our experience. But there's an inverse curve with cost. The inverse curve would say, as compute power is doubling, as our ability to do things doubles, cost cuts in half. This is true. It's undeniable. It is the reality of the world in which we live. That's what an exponential curve looks like. The printing press is off to the left. You'll hear people refer to this big bend as the knee in the knee in the curve. There's the man in the moon. Look at the timeline. Look at the speed at which this accelerating exponential curve takes place in the world. And it's exciting, it's exhilarating when you set your mind and your mindset to think of this relationship. We all experience the Internet of Things. I worked at a startup recently. I left Google to do this. It was a startup that was focused on disaster resilience for the world. It was the idea of connecting every sensor, every data, every bit of knowledge and awareness we could possibly gather and predict what was going to happen in the time of an earthquake or in a flood days in advance. Where's the water going to go to avoid another Houston? Then we started modeling, where's the fire going to go? We're not just going to use 10 fuel types. We're going to understand every fuel type. We're going to understand wind. We're going to understand that a large fire creates its own weather. And we begin to build artificial intelligence and machine learning models that connected and gathered the sum of the data in the world that was relevant and applicable to model and predict what was going to happen in the time of a disaster so we could save lives. So we could help the people with access and functional needs. So we could avoid risk. So we could take advantage of the technologies. Machine-to-machine connections. And then here's my little note. Everybody notice the trend here, because this is the way it works. This is the world in which we live. This exponential curve is what you and we are up against when we're thinking about the Internet of Things, manufacturing, now it's literally everything, and particularly the digitization of everything. When we look at national threats, security threats, supplies, it's almost mind-boggling. Why bio? I put on my cover slide, physical, cyber, bio. I mentioned bio. This isn't a retina scan to get into the data center. It's not a fingerprint or other biometric means in which to have access to critical infrastructure. It's Watson, the cloud, the power of the human brain. It's 8 billion brains connecting, sharing, learning, doing. And how do we keep that secure? And it's not that far off. These are pictures of Elon Musk's project. And I've seen him and others speak about this. I've seen PhDs from Stanford show systems connected to the human brain where we actually see images on a screen of what they're thinking. And they're a little murky right now, but you can make them out. It's crazy. I worked with Lockheed Martin and others, just understanding the potential of biohacking and biorisk. This is real. This is where the world's going. And when we think about locking down devices and processes, and remember, I signed 5-9 contracts with, diaper manufacturing plants where, the diapers are spitting out as fast as you can see them. They're manufacturing diapers, and we're under contract, and that thing can't shut down. It can't be hacked. We can't have a flaw. And many others. That's maybe even a bad example. But my point is this. This is real. These are real pictures. That's the surgical robot that in the kind of upper right corner of the boxes there. There's the little thinner than a human hair that's actually a fingertip in the upper left corner. And those are the connection points that go in and connect to your brain, and they're surgically implanted by that digitized doctor right there, or surgeon. That is the digitization of a surgeon who's going to connect these nodes to one's brain so that one can learn and share. And crazy. It's mind-boggling. I love this. I've literally lived for the last 5 years in innovation labs with S&T and the Air Force Academy and Cal OES and cities and counties and states and companies where we envision the future and we model it out, and this is real, and this is what we in this room are up against. And the amazing potential of what this represents is countered by risk. I mentioned we'd look backwards and we'd look forward. Here's a few examples. After 9/11, I worked for Unisys, by the way, at that time. It's interesting. Our governor at that time, Tom Ridge, became the first secretary. I think it was DHS back then. I can't remember if that was the exact name, but I think it was Homeland Security. And being out of Blue Bell, Pennsylvania, our entire company of about, at that time, it was probably 40,000 employees were like, how can we help? And I was part of a team. We did threat-based, in fact, the first Cal OES threat-based risk assessment, I and some people I worked with at Unisys, we brought these suitcase satellite dishes that we designed. And we said, when something happens and everything's down and you need to communicate, check this out. And we pulled this suitcase out and we opened it up and up popped this satellite dish, and we're like, we can get connectivity right then. It was amazing. We created these things called cookie crumbs. Because we were designing and deploying networks and devices way back then too, we said, hey, how do we get down into a tunnel? How do we get somewhere? What's this thing called mesh networking? How do we connect everything? We created this like string of devices that connect to each other so we could extend a distance and maintain connectivity to see and hear and understand, even down in collapsed buildings. That was so exciting. We went in there, but in this threat-based risk assessment, we identified so many crazy risks because we literally said, what are the risks? What are we not thinking of? What do we not understand that's coming? And this is the context in which, and by the way, I talked about the digitization of the desktop, printer, fax machine, calendar, where everything's getting digitized. Back in 2001, we were deploying branch servers and compute, and that was the risk. How do we lock them down? How do we lock them down? How do we keep it secure? How do we keep our data secure, our facilities, et cetera? When we look at 2021, when we look at next year, you guys know what we're up against. There's billions and billions and billions of new things connecting and sharing and managing this as a process. Configuration management, change management, asset management, all these things, typical ITIL type process design and assurances are so important. But when we think about where we're going in the next 20 years, it becomes exponentially more opportunity and exponentially more risk. And understanding this and seeing forward and getting out ahead of it is the key to success here. I love this one. In fact, I picked this picture because I've been fascinated with this for some time. When I worked at Google and we were working with the city of LA on driverless cars and what it meant, the one little aha moment we had was to a millennial who works in Los Angeles, what's now Uber in a way, But a driverless car, an autonomous vehicle, the sum of expense for that car is less expensive than the cost of parking in LA. That was an aha moment. That was when, by the way, when the leadership at LA, and we had this discussion, they went, prove it. We proved it. And they went, okay, we're going to be a leader in autonomous vehicles in the city of Los Angeles. It was green, it was sustainable, in every way it made sense. But even back then, we were starting to look at the models of how do we cut down on emissions? How do we cut down on fuel costs? How do we become, in an autonomous vehicle world, how do we become more efficient? What do we need to do to become more efficient? And swarms kept going through my head because, I might have had some difficulties with the Pythagorean theorem or whatever else. But one thing that stuck in my mind is the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And if we were going to take 30% off the top of transportation, we need swarm technology. And the evolution, this exponential curve makes swarm technology a reality. We got to get in the air, and everything has to be, thank you, everything has to be the shortest distance between 2 points. That's, maybe that's 30% off the top, whatever it is. It matters. But then when we start to look at these, we start to think, what's the risk of this? I mentioned earlier, and when I was at Google and when I was at Singularity and some of these innovation labs where we had these brilliant minds come together, a couple things kept coming back to our minds, and that's that a small group of people, 4 or 5 of us, on a clean canvas, could rethink the resolution of a challenge. We could rethink an attack surface. We could rethink how to respond to that. But back right after 9/11, as we were going through these long lists of things that, it's painfully obvious today when it comes to fire, but risks to our well-being. And back then, we were thinking about bottle rockets. Could someone drive up and down and just shoot them off? Now, when I think about, someone could go down to Best Buy and buy a drone and, attach something to it and just like, these are the kind of risks that are coming. These are the kind of risks that exist, and these are the kind of risks that we are all thinking about, and rightfully so we should be. That's just a drop in the bucket. It's just literally a drop in the bucket. This one is the one, I mentioned I did this startup out of Palo Alto. I literally woke up and went to bed every day for about 1.5 years straight thinking about and designing artificial intelligence and machine learning solution for global disaster and climate change resilience. This is what we ate, lived, breathed, drank. Artificial intelligence, when you look back, AI has been around a long time, by the way. We hear so much about AI now, but it's been around a long time. It's just been slowly coming. It's been on the exponential curve for 30, 40 years. It goes way back. But keep in mind that curve and how 1 meter turns into 149.6 billion meters very quickly. That's what's going on right now. Everybody I trust in this room read and heard about AlphaGo. Watson and others, I'm just going to use AlphaGo because it caught some good press. IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, others are doing amazing things in this space. But AlphaGo beat a human in the game AlphaGo based on what it learned by watching humans play AlphaGo. That was a huge leap forward. That's way more than chess, which is better than checkers, which was better than Pong. I grew up playing Pong. Right? This AlphaGo beating a human, very quickly thereafter, they had a system teach itself how to play AlphaGo. So no human involvement whatsoever, other than go teach yourself how to play. And I might misquote a little bit of the statistics here, but 3 days later, it beat the AlphaGo that was based on human learning, and actually it won 100 in a row. It was in dispute. This, in the world of cybersecurity, critical infrastructure, transportation systems, energy grids, And boy, did we work a lot with them as well as we were building our models. But as we look at these and we think in terms of the threat of a system that thinks entirely different than we do, a system that teaches itself on concepts that we can't see, that's the problem. We can't see these things. Our minds think linearly, whereas technology is exponential in its nature. AlphaGo, when it was given the green light for itself to think how it would win the game, in 3 days taught itself, and there's no turning back. Now, think out into the future, if you will, please. Think of where we have come from to where we will be on that undeniable exponential curve. Now, I've worked in Sacramento 30 years, probably about the last 10. I've been not here, but I've come back a few times. And I heard some folks one time, my friends, by the way, saying, you know what, I don't think this Moore's Law is going to keep happening. I think we've about exhausted that. Whereas I spent like years listening to people at USC and MIT and Harvard and DARPA and others going, oh no, it's just going to change. Quantum computing, DNA computing. I'll speed up. I think I have just a few minutes left. The brain power equivalent of $1,000, lizard, mouse, monkey, human, 5-year increments, pretty close. I cheated a little bit to make them round numbers. But the idea of having a $1,000 computer that's every bit as powerful as our brains, we will see this in very short order. And remember that we've spent decades trying to create supercomputers that can match our brain. Now for $1,000, everybody can have one. Locking that down, keeping that secure, managing our critical infrastructure, building a sustainable world that focuses on humanity and the potential of these things to serve humanity is what I've spent the last few years doing. But make no mistake, with the good comes the bad. I'll quickly wrap with, this curve kind of up to the left is actually kind of flat to the left, but to fit it all in here, and I love this diagram. This is the mashup where these technologies are starting to mash up and come together and create things. And we began to look at this curve, and I just dropped the years off for a moment, and you guys can search on Google and find 50 versions of these. But as we look out into the future of that curve, our ability to gather, assess, understand, and be the builders of this future is the challenge of everybody in this room and in our society. And I'm going to share this deck so everybody has it. But honestly, if you Google exponential technology curve, you'll find 50 flavors, and they all basically say the same thing. Now, I go back to, on this quote, by the way, I put everyone on the bottom. Because this is a quote by everyone now. It's not a question. 8 billion people. And you know, it's interesting. I've been working like in Tel Aviv and in Africa and Guatemala and Japan. Different cultures and different people look at things entirely different ways. This is a diverse 8 billion new people coming online with that horsepower that's greater than the sum of compute power 5 years ago, if you will. True, but in round enough terms. 8 billion people with new ways of solving problems, new ways of building a portfolio of what's important and what's not. Having the abundance of technology, compute power, and knowledge to do what they think. That is a very interesting proposition, but I put on the bottom of this quote, in fact, I did it this morning, because I had to laugh when I did it, but this is my point. This is not deniable. Everybody knows this quote. This is the reality of what we face and what we're up against. And it's exciting, and it's risky. The next era of compute as we jump, quantum computing. Everybody everybody in this room is pretty technical. Go look at quantum computing. It's happening. It's happening, and it's right here, and it's very quickly going to change our ability to understand the relationship between in the not too distant future, every molecule in our solar system. Just as an example, just to understand those just as an example. Crazy, I know. It's hard almost for our brains to understand compute capacity of that magnitude. But the quantum computer allows that. That's going to change some things. I have 1 minute left. I will fly. Look at that. 1 minute left, and I say thank you. So I hope this was really fascinating for everybody in the room. I wanted to share it so bad, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've been living and breathing this in a crazy way for the last handful of years, and it's been such a mind-blowing experience to take this that I have known so closely and dearly to my heart over the last couple decades, and then apply those experiences and those scar tissues looking forward. And it's when one looks on that exponential curve forward that one sees what's about to happen. And it's exciting, and it's challenging, and I love it, and I was happy to share it with all of you. So thank you very much. All right?